The movement inside this watch costs about $40 wholesale. The crystal over the dial is sapphire, which sits just under diamond on the hardness scale, and those hour markers catching the light are small three-dimensional pieces of metal attached to the dial one at a time, the same way Rolex and Omega do it on watches, costing 10 times as much. The whole watch is $180. Most people have never heard of it. The Swiss watch industry spent the last 25 years quietly restructuring itself, and the numbers are worth sitting with. Between 2000 and 2025, Swiss manufacturers cut production from 29.7 million watches to 14.6 million, roughly half. Export revenue nearly tripled over the same stretch, up to $31 billion. Fewer watches, far more money, which only works if the watches get much more expensive. They did. The tier above $3,825 now accounts for 80% of Swiss export value. In 2000, it was 34%. Meanwhile, the affordable end, the watches an ordinary person might reasonably buy, fell to 5%. Brands that built their reputations on accessible watchmaking left the accessible market and raised prices on the way out, and they've spent every year since implying the price is the proof of the quality. Sometimes there's something behind it. A lot of the time, there isn't much. While that was going on in Switzerland, Japan went the other way. Seiko's industrial movement arm is a subsidiary called Time Module Inc., TMI for short. And at some point, they started licensing their automatic calibers to third-party brands anywhere in the world. The one you'll run into constantly is the NH35A, 24 joules, 41 hours of power reserve, hacking seconds so the second hand stops dead when you set the time, and manual winding. Wholesale, it's about $40 to $50. A service runs $50 to $100 at more or less any watchmaker on the planet. Service it every 5 to 7 years, and an NH35 watch will still be running in 20 or 30 years. You're buying decades of watch for the price of a dinner out. Orient takes it further. On paper, they're owned by Seiko Epson. In practice, they operate independently, and they design and build their own movements in their own Japanese factories. In-house calibers under $200 used to be essentially impossible, and now Orient does it as a matter of routine, which is how we ended up here in 2026. A real automatic watch with sapphire, an in-house or Japanese movement, 200 meters of water resistance, and a solid steel case for under $200. 10 years ago, that was a fantasy sentence. These are the 5 that prove it isn't anymore. Start with the hour markers on the Orient Komatsu. They aren't printed on the dial. Each one is a separate piece of shaped metal, placed individually, cut with facets, so it does different things with light depending on how you tilt it. Rolex uses that technique, Omega uses it, and Tag Heuer's Aqua Racer uses it on a $2,500 watch. Orient does it at $180. That's not luck. That's Orient declining to cut a corner that other brands charge you $2,300 extra to leave uncut. The dial is sunburst finished, brushed outward from the center, so the color moves as you turn your wrist. It goes deep at some angles and opens up at others. That finish costs real money to execute correctly, and Orient executes it correctly at this price. The movement is Orient's own F6922, built in Japan, automatic, with manual winding and hacking, 40 hours of reserve. All of it under a flat sapphire crystal in a 41.8mm steel case rated to 200 meters with a screw-down crown. Seiko's own diver at this price still ships with Hardlex mineral crystal, which scratches and hazes after a few years of actual wear. The Komatsu gives you sapphire for the same money. And honestly, that single spec is most of the argument. Sapphire at $180, sapphire on the Aqua Racer at $2,500. And the gap between those numbers is mostly what the logo costs. The honest problems, the clasp is basic with no micro adjustment, and the bracelet is solid without being anything special. At $180, those are the trade-offs, and I don't think there are others worth raising. Best value diver under $200 this year. Now flip it around. Picture a 1960s dress watch instead. Thin, warm, elegant, from back when elegant meant quiet. That's the Orient Bambino. And it has turned more people into mechanical watch enthusiasts than any other watch under $200 I can name. The domed crystal that bends the light slightly at the edges is deliberate, borrowed, straight out of mid-century dress watchmaking. Flat crystals look clinical and modern. A dome gives you warmth and a suggestion of age, and when light comes across it at an angle, the whole thing moves. It's the same effect you get off a $2,000 vintage Jaeger LeCoultre. The Bambino does a surprisingly good impression of it at $150. Inside is the F6724, again Orient's own in-house automatic out of their Japanese factories, with hacking seconds and manual winding. Most competitors at this price are using generic Chinese movements or buying Japanese calibers off third-party suppliers. Orient builds theirs. The case is 40.5 millimeters across and 11.8 millimeters thick, which means it goes under a dress cuff without catching on anything. Cream dial, blue hands, a combination that's been correct since 1955 and will still be correct in 2055. The one real caveat is the stock strap, which is bad. Budget $20 for a leather replacement and swap it the day the box arrives. On a decent strap, it looks like a $400 watch, and reviewers have been saying so for about a decade. The Seiko 5KX is the one that refuses to pick a lane. The SRPD series 5KX to collectors descends directly from the SKX007. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, the SKX007 was the most loved entry-level automatic diver the hobby has ever produced, a genuine cult object, the watch that pulled tens of thousands of people into mechanical watches and never quite let them back out. The 5KX kept the case shape, the crown guards, the whole silhouette you can identify across a room. It also comes in more dial colors than anything else here, orange and black and green and blue and silver and teal, and a pile of variations in between. The movement is Seiko's 4R36, with day date, 41 hours of reserve, 100 meters of water resistance, and a 120-click unidirectional bezel. The crown sits at 4 o'clock behind guards so substantial it's a little odd there's no screw-down mechanism underneath them. The limitations get equal time here. Hardlex instead of sapphire, 100 meters instead of 200, no screw-down crown. I think those are fair trades for what you get back, which is character, a real lineage, and a watch that works on a NATO strap Saturday and a bracelet Monday without looking confused about it. Then there's a spec sheet that shouldn't exist at $130, which the Pagani design PD1661 somehow has. A genuine Seiko TMINH 35A, not a clone or a copy, sourced from Seiko's industrial subsidiary. A ceramic bezel insert, the same material Rolex uses in a Submariner that runs north of $10,000. Sapphire crystal, screw-down crown, 8 colorways, up to 200 meters. That combination at $130 is strange enough that I understand people not believing it. The caveats here are serious, and I'd rather put them plainly. Finishing is competent and no better. Pagani design has no brand history worth mentioning, and no resale value to speak of. Nobody is going to ask you about it at dinner. You buy this one because you want a proven Japanese automatic behind sapphire with a ceramic bezel for $130, and because that parts list at that price is the entire reason you're looking. If that's what you're after, nothing else in the range competes. The last one needs patience and a price alert on your phone. The Citizen Tsuyosa lists between $450 and $495, but Citizen runs promotions on it fairly regularly, and those promotions drop it to $180 or $200. At that number, it becomes the most technically impressive automatic under $200 anywhere. The bracelet is the reason. Watch how it comes out of the case with no visible seam, polished center links against brushed outer links, tapering toward the clasp, the sort of detail that normally costs $3,000 to get right. Tissot's PRX has an integrated bracelet at $725. The AP Royal Oak has one at $20,000. A Tsuyosa caught on sale gets you the same idea for $185. The movement is Citizen's Caliber 8210, 21,600 vibrations per hour, 42 hours of reserve, visible through a sapphire display back. Sapphire on both sides. The case is 40 millimeters and wears smaller than that on purpose. Caveats are real. 50 meters of water resistance, so keep it out of the pool. And the integrated bracelet makes strap swaps a genuine pain. At $185, I still think it stands alone. Set the alert, wait for it, and buy when it drops. Here's the arithmetic the luxury end would rather you didn't run. All 5 of these watches together come to under $750. A diver, a dress watch, a daily sports watch, a spec outlier, and an integrated bracelet piece. That's less than one Tissot PRX. All 5 run proven Japanese automatics. Most of them have sapphire, and every one of them can be serviced anywhere on Earth. Or you spend the $725 on the Tissot, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. The Tissot gives you Swiss-made on the dial, a silicone balance spring, more consistent finishing, and a name people recognize without you having to explain anything. Those are genuine advantages, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What 5 cheap watches give you instead is the right one for whatever you're doing that day, worn without thinking about it much, which matters more than it sounds like. Not wanting to take a $725 watch into salt water, or to the gym, or anywhere it might get scratched, is a cost that never shows up on the receipt, but you pay it constantly. At $150 a watch, it disappears. You wear it, you use it, you knock it against things. That's what they're for. There's a trick to reading a case, the way someone in the trade reads it. Every surface is a decision. Every edge, every point where brushed metal becomes polished metal. When a watchmaker wants a case to look expensive, they mix the finishes, brushed on the flat top surfaces, which scatters light and makes the metal look textured and solid, set against polished chamfers on the edges that throw back one clean line. Your eye reads that contrast as care before your brain works out why. Rolex does it, Omega does it, and the Orient Kamasu does it at $180. Same design thinking at both ends of the market, with wildly different marketing budgets sitting on top. The industry line is that you get what you pay for. In 2026, $200 gets you a sapphire crystal, a Japanese automatic that will outlast you with basic maintenance, real steel, applied indices, and a watch that's still ticking when you hand it to somebody younger. What it doesn't get you is the name on the dial. That's a trade worth making, as long as you know precisely what you're trading away. If I had to keep one of these for the rest of my life, it'd be the Kamasu. In-house movement, sapphire, 200 meters. The most honest $180 I've spent on anything that tells time. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and click the next video on your screen for another interesting breakdown on your favorite watches.